The national lockdown affecting all sectors of society and industry, resulting in job losses or loss of income for some, we ask the question tonight, have unions done enough to protect their members against the effects of government's lockdown regulations? Well, we now speak to employment and labor law specialist Osborne Molatudi from Molatudi Advisory Services. Osborne, good evening and thank you for your time tonight. Is it a fair assessment to say unions have just really not done enough to address issues, but have just simply lobbied members to go back to work?
Good evening, Thabo, and thank you for having me on your show. Well, it is arguable that in a way, trade unions may not have done enough in order to ensure that this whole issue about safety and the return to duty is well understood, especially from their members' perspective. I think what we have been seeing is them raising issues without actually providing a checklist to say we have visited a certain number of schools and this is where we found them to be lacking, and therefore we are calling upon our members not to report for duty. But earlier on, you had the NUM vice president, and I think he came out clear insofar as, you know, the responsibility that the unions have, insofar as the expectation of their members reporting for duty, which mines have already done that. And that expectation should extend to the teachers and their respective trade unions.
Is it the responsibility of trade unions to participate in coming up with proactive solutions that would protect their members?
Indeed, they should. As much as the general obligation lies on the employer to provide a workplace that is safe and healthy, the employees, and in this instance the teachers, have to play their part insofar as engagements are concerned. You may have seen from the Education Ministry that they were asserting that there have been engagements behind the scenes between the officials and the teachers union, and that an announcement is to the effect that the schools are then ready, everyone must report to duty. Then a few minutes later, then you hear unions say, no, we can't go back because we have not been engaged. So it has been a sort of a back and forth. But yes, they need to be part and parcel of that process to actually help the employer, especially during this time, to ensure that all the schools are COVID-19 compliant, and those schools that are not compliant, of course, the Education Minister has indicated that there's no need, for teachers to report for duty, and including the learners. And we're talking grade 7 and grade 12 in this instance.
How difficult, though, has the work of the unions been? One, because you are dealing with an unseen and unknown virus. It's new territory. They've never had to deal with a pandemic of this magnitude as it relates to work, getting back to school, whether getting back down underground or just simply continuing to work as an essential service in the food and beverage sector. Two, not having been able to use the usual tools that they have. We can picket, we can march, we can stage a sit-in, we can do a go slow. They are unable to use any of those tools, and they have to rely to an extent in engagement and rely on experts to give them information as opposed to being familiar in those territories.
Yes, to a certain extent, they are facing that kind of a challenge. But one of the unintended challenges is that, of course, if they don't report for duty, the Education Ministry will be entitled to implement a no work, no pay. So who would want that during these times? But coming to your question, trade unions cannot run away from this. They have to be part and parcel of the engagement. They have to actively make sure that they form part and parcel of those engagements, and not just to sit back and make pronouncement that the schools are not safe and therefore not going back. They have to be there. They have to play their part in the appointment of COVID-19 compliance officers to ensure that the necessary precautions that are expected of the Education Ministry to put in place are there. If they're not there, to help to make sure that they are in place. You can't just sit back and say, no, there are no sanitizers, there are no masks, there are no mask screening tests, etc. When in fact you're sitting at home and doing nothing about it. Remember, here there's a competing rights. There's right to education, right to life, and of course, right to fair labor practices. And I think unions cannot just be passers-by and do nothing about it. And I'm sure some of the unions do take this issue seriously. And that is why I think a significant number of them are reporting for duty tomorrow.
Yeah. How huge is the component of non-unionized members who are returning to work at this point? Because one of the answers we received was that, well, unions have been consulted throughout this whole entire process. They were part of engagement at NEDLEC, so they agreed to these deals that have been put in place. But there is a huge number that is not unionized, that has not had a voice.
That number will largely be in the private sector. One would assume that most teachers in the private schools do not belong to trade unions, but I don't have figures to confirm that. But be that as it may, I think officials have gone out of their way to ensure that everything is in place for tomorrow. As much as I said about the right to education, we need our learners back in classes, but at the same time, we need to make sure that the place is safe, is COVID-19 compliant, all the necessary precautions as explained in the Department of Employment and Labor Regulations are in place. So even non-unionized, they're embracing this call to report for duty tomorrow. And as I say, it's grade 7 and grade 12. That's, that should be enough for the teachers to put measures in control.